Okay, hi everyone. Can you all hear us in your headsets? Yep,
All
okay,
right.
great. Thank you everyone for joining, and we are really excited today to talk to you about SharePoint. So my name is John Mighell. I'm the Director of SharePoint and OneDrive, and with me,
My name is Adam Harmetz. I've been working on knowledge systems and collaborative apps for 20 years at Microsoft. I'm the VP of product for SharePoint. Our LinkedIn QR codes are on the screen there. Both of us are pretty active on LinkedIn 4 or 5 times a week, talking about the industry, talking about AI. Good idea to follow us if you want to follow up for more from this talk.
right? So thanks, Adam. We'll both be showing you a lot of content and some slides, but also a lot of demos today. But really, we're going to share some news, go deeper on some of what you heard in the keynote and innovation sessions earlier this week, and really just show you how SharePoint is becoming the knowledge platform for Copilot and agents. But before we do that, let's take a moment to set the stage on why SharePoint is really at the heart of the Copilot and agentic transformation. Now, of course, you're all familiar with SharePoint as the knowledge platform for enterprise. And SharePoint is not just heavily used, it's really foundational. And the stats on the screen speak to this, right? 2 million sites are created every single day. It's the default canvas for collaboration across enterprise. And over 2 billion files are added to SharePoint every day. That's my favorite stat to share at the Thanksgiving table. And 3 billion workflows run on SharePoint content and are automated weekly. That's everything from approvals to notifications to just general data movement. So it's the knowledge platform for enterprise and now becoming the knowledge platform for Copilot and agents. So building on those 3 stats we were just looking at, Copilot is also far and away SharePoint is also far and away the #1 grounding source for Copilot. When you look at kind of the stack ranking, it's actually really not even close. It's SharePoint by far #1. Just below it is email, but SharePoint grounding actually dwarfs email by a rough magnitude of 2. So that's why updated, enriched content in SharePoint is so important if you want to see that real impact with Copilot, agents, and AI in general. Now, we'll dive into that in more depth in just a minute, but first, let's zoom out to one of the new concepts that we landed in the keynote earlier this week, and that is WorkIQ. So I'm sure you've all heard about WorkIQ, probably been to a number of sessions that have referenced WorkIQ. WorkIQ is the intelligence layer that enables Microsoft 365 Copilot and agents to know your work inside and out. It connects your context, your workflow, your relationships, and everything in between to deliver an experience that is built specifically for you. And as you can see on the screen here, there's a number of different components that feed into WorkIQ, but today we'll be focusing specifically on what we're calling the SharePoint plus Copilot advantage. Now, the sheer volume of grounding calls that we talked about necessitates this relationship, but ultimately what makes it so powerful? The way we like to think about it is only Copilot can speak SharePoint fluently. And what you're seeing here on the screen are just a few examples, but you may have actually seen in the keynote or some of the innovation sessions the side-by-side comparisons that we've done with ChatGPT. When grounded in your content on SharePoint, only Copilot can unlock that kind of new level of productivity and insight far beyond what other AI solutions can provide. And while many other AI tools can retrieve or summarize SharePoint content, and that's great, we love that. If you actually look at most of their websites that talk about connectors, the top one that they list is SharePoint. They say, hey, we connect to your SharePoint content. Again, we love that. But the delta between high-level connectors and Copilot's native integration is actually pretty significant. Copilot can reason over the metadata attached to your files. It can reason over the full richness of your documents, your Office documents. It can reason over SharePoint pages and your internet content. It can reason over embedded images in PowerPoint. Adam will show you that. It can reason over encrypted files while still respecting permissions and DLP policies and more. So really, what it boils down to is the Copilot plus SharePoint advantage helps you accelerate your path to becoming a frontier firm. So what is a frontier firm? Again, this is a concept you've heard us talk about for a little while now. We landed this some months back. The way we think about it is a frontier firm is an organization that's putting AI really into the center of their operations. And we call them frontier firms. We are on our own journey to becoming a frontier firm here at Microsoft. I'm sure you all in the crowd are likewise as well, and those of you who are watching the live stream too. And these firms look markedly different from those that we know today. And so what we'll show you today is how SharePoint is really helping power that and deliver the AI-powered future of work. Now, when we think about some of the key ingredients to becoming a frontier firm and becoming AI-ready, you need AI-ready content. That's really a foundational component. And today, most organizations have scattered files with outdated information and maybe manual processes peppered in, which makes it hard for AI to deliver consistent, reliable answers that are grounded in your data. Now, we know that LLMs are probabilistic by nature. I know that's not news to anyone here. They generate responses based on patterns, and if your content is chaotic, that chaos will replicate itself into your AI output. So AI will reflect those gaps, producing incomplete, irrelevant, or just totally inaccurate answers. So actually, to borrow a phrase from one of our great community members, and maybe the person who coined this is either watching online or in the crowd today, with AI, it's really not garbage in, garbage out. It's garbage in, garbage amplified. And I think that's really a truism here. So we want to help you move from content chaos to Copilot ready. So now let's dive into how SharePoint helps you organize and enrich your content and give Copilot and agents the trusted foundation that you need for smarter, more reliable answers. So the rest of this talk, we're going to segment into these three categories, or the way we like to think about it. These are kind of the jobs that you would hire SharePoint for in the AI era. And so first we have Ask and Find. This is your Q&A search. This is a lot of the foundation and where a lot of companies are starting with their AI journey. Next, we have Organize and Analyze. This is all about getting your content to an AI-ready state. And finally, we have Build and Automate. And this is where companies really, we see, start realizing that frontier firm promise, building processes and automating workflows with AI. So now I'll hand off to Adam to walk us through Ask and Find.
Great, thank you, John. So yeah, Ask and Find. I hope this pillar is pretty straightforward, but when we think about these investments, from the ask perspective, it is 2025, so you can actually ask your documents about the knowledge contained within them. And for Find, it's no longer about sort of 10 blue links and search. In addition to that, it's also about how search is a tool for an LLM to sort of be able to reason over that sea of data and knowledge that John was talking about. And the why of here is sort of hopefully pretty obvious. Everybody's looking to save time. And we really think this Ask and Find pillar is about saving a lot of people a little bit of time every day is the way we think about it. And it's also something that's really ripe for AI transformation. I don't know about you, but I think about what I put as a skill on LinkedIn, and I don't really put a skill on LinkedIn that says I'm really good at finding that random page on the internet somewhere. I've been trained I sort of need to be, but I don't want to. That's not why I come into the office, and that's why not a lot of people come into the office. And so I think that is really why this is the first pillar. It's so foundational to the rest of the AI investments that really go up the hierarchy of needs as we sort of start organizing and then building solutions. But it starts with just great information architecture and knowledge retrieval. And if we're going to hire AI to do this tool, we should hire AI to do this once. And so that's really our strategy, is that we have one platform for AI, one platform that delivers that Copilot plus SharePoint advantage in a bunch of different places throughout the ecosystem and a bunch of different experiences. I'm not here to tell you there's only one way to search for files or to find and retrieve information. In fact, we like the fact that it's sort of in the river of a bunch of different and new and evolving places of working. So when we talk about that Copilot and SharePoint advantage, it applies, of course, in Copilot chat. I'll show that in a couple minutes, as well as in our app, where in September we actually announced a brand new way of experiencing AI within the SharePoint app that I'll show you in just a second. There's also new AI-born apps like Notebook or Designer or Pages, powered by SharePoint, powered by the same sort of underlying RAG platform. And then a whole bunch of agents as well that can leverage all that as well. It's really important as you think about your AI strategy and think about your content strategy. I think all the content vendors, ourselves included, are evolving and building new sort of systems for being able to extract knowledge on top of it. And we really believe if we can do that once and power a bunch of experiences, that's what you need to trust SharePoint for your AI evolution. So enough talking, enough framing. If you could switch, we'll go over to a modern SharePoint site. The title of the talk is about AI, so I will talk about AI a lot, but when you see beautiful things, I like to pause and talk about the beauty. Over the past 12 months, we've also made huge investments in just the core UX of SharePoint. So what you're seeing here is a completely out-of-the-box SharePoint site, if you haven't been following along, with new web parts like the flexible sections, editorial cards, image cutouts. Yes, you've heard us say AI many times this week. You've heard us talk about Copilot. We will in this talk as well. But half our investments are in the core UX platform of SharePoint, making sure it is still an awesome place to create beautiful things that humans can consume. And we're seeing really great pickup of this. This flexible sections web part that we did that allows you to sort of lay out however you want, used over 1 million times a week, even though it's only been GA for a couple months. But with that, let us get back to sort of I mentioned how AI is now experienced in a new way on SharePoint, and we do that through something we call the floating agent button, or FAB. We think it's fabulous. That's about the best joke we're going to have in this talk. And you can see it right down here, and I will actually zoom in so you can even see it better. And if you open it up, here I am. John will talk about, this is the knowledge agent, and John will talk about the knowledge agent, especially for site owners, a little bit later. I'll go over how visitors of the site are interacting with this knowledge agent. You can almost think about it as an AI mode for SharePoint. So yes, you can ask a question, open up free prompt chat box, but it also is, we will add more and more out-of-the-box AI actions. For instance, this easy one right here, summarize a page, as time goes by. And as you'd expect, it's contextual. So if I go into a document library and I click on the knowledge agent, you can see it has other actions here like summarize the file, create an FAQ, get an audio overview. And so it follows you around no matter what SharePoint site you're on. And it has AI actions that are tuned to the scenes that you're on. And so that will be an enduring pattern to sort of, we hope, just put AI right where you need it, but not in your face when you don't. For those that are really geeking out and intranet builders, this sort of FAB button is smart enough if you have custom extensions to sort of move itself around. So we really think it can integrate well with your existing sites. It integrate well with out-of-the-box SharePoint. Be there when you need it, and then when you don't need it, it'll be out of the way. But I said that is not the only way that you interact with AI on your SharePoint content and extract knowledge. Of course, you can do that in the AI-born Copilot app. So I'll show you a couple examples of that right here. One of the really basic things is if I am not in the SharePoint site, but I want updates on a SharePoint site, or even ask a question about any SharePoint site, that's directly integrated right into Copilot. So I have my things all saved right here. So I'm just going to summarize the updated things on this site. And I love / commanding if you haven't looked at it. You also hit the plus button. And you can see sites now is one of the things you can select. So if I select the site we're on before, I actually get a really great update, not only of the knowledge in the site, but the latest updates that are happening on the site as well. It's going to tell me it found 50 files, and it's going to say, here's the latest sort of things that have been changed on the site. 55, it looks like. And so just a really good way where SharePoint and its knowledge is connected throughout the entire ecosystem. So that is great. I will go through a couple more queries here that really gets to the heart of that Copilot and SharePoint advantage that we were talking about before. For instance, I'll just fire this one off, where I'm going to ask it to look in particular at a PowerPoint that is pretty interesting. So look at this image on slide 6 and extract some information from it. So while it's going to that, I will go over and show you what's on this slide. So on slide 6, you can see it's a pretty grainy image of a bunch of university logos. And if I go back to Copilot, it has actually been able to go and extract that information from the slide. That sounds a little detailed. How often are you going to really be able to do that? And of course, it can be more generic. What the point here is we've made huge investments in understanding deeply the types of content that is stored in SharePoint, especially Office files. We have thumbnails of every single image on a slide. We can give that to the LLM as needed. Tables in Word. We can use code interpreter for Excel. And so it's what John was really talking about before. This is one example. I could have shown dozens more of really how tight that integration is between the content store and the AI systems built on top of it. One last thing I'll show that really highlights that, John mentioned sort of the compliance envelope that is built on SharePoint, the governance, and how that's connected to the AI systems. I'll show you that really quick right here. One more query I'll do. Let me see. I'm going to draft an update for the CEO, and I'm going to select this file. While it does that, I'll show you the file again. It is an encrypted file. It is highly confidential. It is encrypted by default. Other AI systems, such as ChatGPT, could not be able to reason over this file, or just hasn't done the integration work to integrate with our governance plane. So the scenario is broken. But in Copilot, you can see, it has that phases that were just referenced in the file itself. And if I look at the actual response, it tells me that it's a highly confidential response. If I look at the thing that it was grounded on, it also tells me it's highly confidential. And sort of just tying that loop between the content system and the AI system. It knows, Copilot knows deeply every single ins and outs of SharePoint and that's connected through. And we think when we're sort of summarizing that ask and find pillar, it's an incredibly important foundational thing for your AI investments. So that was just a whirlwind tour. Let's move on to the section 2.
Okay. All right, thank you, Adam. So now we will move on to the second pillar of today's talk, which is organize and analyze. So this is like I said, about getting your content to that AI-ready state and then showing how once you do that, Copilot and agents can reason over it and deliver more better, reliable, more smart answers. So let's dive in. Okay. So first, let's talk about what it really takes to succeed with AI. And we think, again, one of the key ingredients here is having that foundational knowledge platform. So we know that companies that invest in their content management strategies are more likely to succeed with their AI journey. Ultimately, AI is only as good as the data that it's grounded on. So the stat on the screen there, 63% of organizations do not have or are unsure if they have AI-ready data. This is from Gartner, and then Gartner goes on to predict actually that through 2026, organizations will actually abandon about 60% of their AI projects if they're unsupported by AI-ready data. So just underlies how critical this is. Now, what is AI-ready content? The way we think about it is there's sort of three components of it. It needs to be organized and enriched. So this means your content should be logically structured, it should be tagged with metadata, it should be easy to navigate. Second, it should be fresh and governed. That means it needs to be regularly updated. There should be clear ownership to prevent outdated or irrelevant content from lingering. And third, it should be contextual and high quality. We know that AI systems don't just read words, they interpret meaning based on context, so we have to be aware of that. Now, let's dig into a little bit on metadata, which we see as really a critical ingredient to this knowledge readiness for AI. As we said before, large language models are probabilistic. They use a tokenized approach to produce and replicate patterns, which is great for flexibility. It's great for content generation. It's great for just volume content in general. But for business, and especially in regulated industries, you often need just the answer that's precise and reliable. You don't necessarily need a creative response. You just need the right response. And so we're increasingly seeing metadata in SharePoint as one of those anchors and kind of a guardrail that you can put on your data that helps your AI outputs be much more reliable, concise, and accurate, which is in a lot of cases what you're really looking for. So going back to this concept of you moving from content chaos to moving to a Copilot ready state, when grounded in the same SharePoint document library with populated metadata, if you ask ChatGPT a question, it won't be able to provide you a very good response. In this example on the screen, it'll provide you a few different paragraphs, kind of like waffling with not super helpful information. Whereas if you ask Copilot the same query grounded in the same content with metadata, it goes, okay, you're looking for the products that are in stock in Florida? Sure, here's a quick table of the two things you're looking for. So it's exactly what you're looking for without all of the fluff, and in a lot of cases, that's exactly what you need. Now, we love metadata, of course, on the SharePoint team, but that doesn't mean that every single file needs to have metadata attached to it, right? But what we do think is for high-value content, it's often the difference between garbage amplified and insights delivered. So you can see on the screen here some examples. I'm sure you can think of more of your own use cases, but these are categories where we think, these are structured high-value content categories where we think metadata is really helpful. So things like, you know, product catalogs, financial documents, marketing assets, and with our latest agentic innovations with Knowledge Agent, which Adam was just showing you, we're making it actually really easy now to populate that metadata and attach it to your document libraries. So that brings us to Knowledge Agent. Maybe some of you in the crowd already know of Knowledge Agent, have heard of Knowledge Agent. Can I get a quick, all right, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, so Knowledge Agent moved into public preview in September. We've seen great momentum and usage from our community so far. I think we're approaching about 2,000 tenants that have opted in to the Knowledge Agent public preview just in about 2 months, which is fantastic. We've gotten a bunch of great feedback from all of you, and we'll show you how we're addressing that in just a second. But the way we think of Knowledge Agent is it is your AI assistant in SharePoint. It's invoked through that floating agent button or floating action button that Adam was showing you, and it helps you improve your AI responses, drive business process, and ultimately keep your content fresh. So let me now show you another one of the Knowledge Agent use cases. Switch over here. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is how Knowledge Agent helps you populate metadata in a document library. So this is an expense report library. You can see we have a bunch of different file types, PDFs, Word documents. If we actually click into this one, this appears to be a handwritten invoice on someone's notepad that they tore off and took a picture with their thumb in it. Okay, we'll take it. Not ideal format, but we can see what Knowledge Agent can do over it. So if we ask Knowledge Agent to first I open up Knowledge Agent, it provides me all these different contextual options. So because I have this image selected, it gives me the option to extract text from the image using OCR, the ocular character recognition, which just comes included with Knowledge Agent. I can ask questions, but in this case, I'll actually ask Knowledge Agent to help me organize this library. So from here, I can say, okay, can you add me some metadata columns? In this case, we'll ask for transaction date, transaction amount, and vendor name. And Knowledge Agent will go through and read each of the individual files, and it'll pull out this metadata for each of them, and it'll build the columns, and then it'll populate those columns with the metadata. So you can see that processing here. This looks right. So we get the transaction date in a nice format. We get the transaction amount and the vendor name. Okay, that's great. I'm also going to ask Knowledge Agent now to create a column that's not from data explicitly in the document. So in this case, I'm asking for a region to be applied to the metadata. The region isn't explicitly in the document, but there is an address in the document. And so the agent's able to intelligently reason over that and go, okay, here's the region that we'll apply. All right, so this looks good. We'll save this as a new view. And while this is processing, this goes back to the point that we were making, right? It's not only about adding metadata to your content. You can obviously do that. You've been able to do that in SharePoint for some time now. It's about making it this much easier to do. So when people who are managing document libraries like this want to create a more structured environment so that their AI can reason over it better, this is a much easier way to do it than populating metadata manually. So I think one of the barriers that we've seen traditionally in metadata is like, yeah, it's great, we all get the idea, but it's really hard to populate. We're really kind of reducing that barrier. Okay, so you can see we have our metadata that's starting to get populated. This is great. I can see on the right-hand side here the autofill activity. I will track that. It looks like it's all completed. I'm going to now ask Knowledge Agent to add one more column for me. And this time, I'm going to ask it to create a column for approval status. So what it'll do here is it will actually look at the rule, essentially, that I've written here in my prompt, where over a certain dollar amount, it should have one approval status. Under a certain dollar amount, it should have another approval status. And you can see that's applied that here to this approval status column. I will save this change. And so what we've basically done here is added my own human knowledge, which is I know that we have some approval process standards within my company, and Knowledge Agent knows the details in this document library. We've combined that together, my human knowledge with the agentic capabilities, and we populated this approval status, which is a really helpful thing for me to see as I'm looking through this document library and going, okay, how can I quickly scan these and see which ones have been approved or not? Okay. So now we have this document library that's been populated with metadata in just a couple of minutes. Now let's see how Copilot responds when I ask it a query about this. So if I ask Copilot to list all of the expenses that meet a certain criteria, and I will reference this specific folder, the expenses folder that we were just looking at, you'll see what it's able to do here is reason over all of that metadata and provide me a really helpful response in a concise table. So again, if you asked ChatGPT to do this, it would kind of waffle and it would take a long time and it would say, I don't really know, can't read the metadata. When we ask Copilot to do it, it provides this really concise and helpful response. So we're really excited about this. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I know it's hard to clap with the headphones on. It's a little bit awkward, but we appreciate it. We really think that this is a big step, a significant step in that journey towards getting those accurate, reliable, concise responses and just correct responses, which is, I think, what everyone's looking for out of their AI solutions. Okay, so now let's move to more of a site manager scenario. So if I'm back in that site that Adam was showing you earlier, I'm going to open up the Knowledge Agent and see what it can help me do here. There's an Improve This Site skill, so we'll open that up. And when I do, it gives me a couple of different suggestions for things that I can do to improve this SharePoint site. So first it says, hey, there's some inactive pages. So I'll open this up and look at some inactive pages. Now, on this demo tenant, we have a very strict setting for what constitutes an inactive page. I think it's like 18 hours or something. You're probably going to want to adjust that so you can change your inactivity time here, and then Knowledge Agent will help you apply based on your settings. From here, I can go and view the page if I want to, or I can actually retire it or even delete it directly from here. So this is a great way to help me clean up sites or pages that are no longer relevant. Super easy. The second thing a Knowledge Agent can help me do is find content gaps. So here I can see that, okay, it looks like people have been searching on this site for one of our products, 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀 pricing, but they've not really been able to find anything helpful. And if I look at the related terms, I can see other search terms that people have been searching for and again, haven't been able to get what they're looking for. So now I'll ask Copilot or Knowledge Agent here, okay, well, that's great, but what can I do about it? And Knowledge Agent will trill through the different content on this site, and it'll pull up a suggestion that's hopefully helpful for me to specifically address that content gap that it called out. So in this case, what it's looking for, here we go, right. So it says, hey, the information is found in a Word document rather than a SharePoint page, and so users might not be engaging with it because they're expecting a concise web-based summary or an FAQ page. Okay, that makes sense. So then it'll say, hey, what I can do for you is actually create a dedicated SharePoint page for 𝗦𝗲𝘀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 pricing with all of this information. I'll even add an FAQ section to it, and I'll ground it automatically on this pricing document that I found. I can hit create page here, and it'll just go ahead and build that right for me. So again, right, like how much work would that have taken you beforehand, right? I think this is hopefully really helping with a lot of the site manager functionality. And then finally, you can fix broken links here as well. So it'll call out a bunch of different links that are dead-ending or need to be redirected. You can see some here, and I can actually either view the link itself or I can redirect it directly from Knowledge Agent as well. So just a few ways that Knowledge Agent's really helping you as a site manager, or if you're a document library manager, or if you're just someone that is passionate about metadata and improving AI responses. Okay.
Did we talk about the icon? Do you want to just mention?
Oh, should we talk about the icon? Okay.
I don't want to just remove any confusion. When I demoed, you might have noticed the Knowledge Agent had a SharePoint icon. When he's demoing, it has a little sparkle. Just in case anybody noticed, we're actually flighting and testing in our private public preview which icon responds better. So there's, just so you're not confused, there's not two things here. It's just one thing, but we're just sort of testing. So
yeah.
Behind the scenes peek at when you come to Ignite.
Yeah. I think there's a roughly 33% chance that you get the SharePoint icon, this sparkle icon, or a slightly different icon.
We can vote later on which one you prefer.
Okay. All right. So a couple other things I wanted to touch on around Knowledge Agent. As I mentioned, almost 2,000 tenants that have signed up for this so far, which has been fantastic. We've heard a lot of good feedback. A couple things I wanted to clarify. First, we have confirmed the licensing model for Knowledge Agent. It will be fully included in your Microsoft 365 Copilot license. So, yes, thank you.
Exchange is getting the biggest applause of the night.
Unsurprisingly, yeah. So no separate SKU, no separate license, no pay-as-you-go. It's just fully included in your Copilot license. So yeah, that's great. The other thing I should mention is Knowledge Agent is still on track for general availability in early 2026. And then the final thing is we've also enabled site-level opt-in to the public preview now. So previously, you could only opt into the public preview at the tenant level, and then you could opt out specific sites. Now, excuse me, you can actually opt in at the individual site level. So hopefully that all gives you confidence to go out and try Knowledge Agent. We want to hear your feedback. We've gotten a lot of great constructive feedback from this community, which we love. But here's a couple of glowing pieces of feedback that I'll share as well. Kelly from Mars calls Knowledge Agent a total game changer, especially in the context of corporate legal departments. Simon from Mott McDonald says it's opening up new possibilities and also accelerating AI adoption, which is fantastic. We love to see it. And Corey from Allegis simply calls Knowledge Agent seriously impressive. So hopefully that and those updates on the last slide give you all some confidence to go out and try Knowledge Agent. Okay, and with that, I will hand back to Adam for our third and final pillar of build and automate.
Yeah, so this first pillar that I talked about, ask and find, that was sort of broad, right? Everybody benefits from our work centrally to make SharePoint really tightly integrated with AI services and Copilot. And then what John talked about was sort of how we can empower site owners and content owners, and sort of how you can sort of take a Knowledge Agent, work with the Knowledge Agent, and help it for specific types of content. So it sort of builds on one another. And this final pillar, build and automate, is really sort of the ultimate way that SharePoint makers can help evolve the platform and build solutions for their customers or for their, their employees within their organization. Long history here for SharePoint. On-prem, SharePoint was the #1 solution host for Windows Server. And then in the cloud, it is the #1 connector for Power Platform. we shared the stat before about 3 billion flow runs in a particular week. And so we know that content is incredibly essential to solution building. And we also know that solution building is sort of having a renaissance right now as AI is clearly transforming it. I mentioned Ask and Find is helping a lot of people a little bit. Really, I think in this build and automate pillar, it's helping that cohort of makers an awful lot. We've seen this across the industry this year with sort of vibe coding tools, really showing how a chat-based interface, one done well and one successful, is actually really preferred over traditional ways of building solutions. And of course, I have one stat, there's many, and you probably all see it. There's just this renewed interest in actually building solutions, especially particular verticals within organizations, than I have ever seen in my 20-year career. And so what we're going to talk about today is really sort of the foundation and some early examples. I think you'll see us really build on this in 2026 with even more powerful investments. But really, now and in 2026, it is going to be a renaissance for SharePoint makers to be able to build and create solutions. And I think there's sort of 3 pillars that you see on the slide. First is just create, and creating from within the AI-born Copilot app. You saw the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint agent. SharePoint containers or SharePoint objects are following with that. And I'll show you in a little bit a list and a page sort of tool to be able to create things within Copilot app. And then automate and agents. So those are both sort of separate things. Workflows still exist. Sometimes they're agentic, sometimes they're not. I'll show you an incredibly new UX that simplifies the ability to create Power Automate workflows, agentic workflows, aligned with Teams. In fact, I'll show you the exact same UX in Teams and in SharePoint. And then that third one, agent building, of course, is incredibly important. And we'll talk a lot about agent building. You've probably gotten to other sessions on agent building. I think SharePoint's point of view is that an agent is great, but it's not the full end-to-end solution. What you sort of need is a sense of place for that agent to live and interact with and have the content stored alongside it. Maybe you need some synthesis, like you need a home page that says, here's how you use the agent, and here's where you can find the content that the agent interacts with, especially for these content solutions. And so, yes, agents are incredibly important, built with Copilot Studio, but really we see it as one part of the larger solution building for content going forward. So, once again, enough talk. Let me show you, if you want to switch over to the demo machine. John, I think it's great that 𝗦𝗲𝗀 can deliver t-shirts and keynotes for tech conferences, but let's expand it a little bit. Let's actually see if they can get into the costume business. So here I am in Copilot. I think a great way to do that is to go to some science fiction conventions. This has nothing to do with SharePoint so far right now. It's just world knowledge. Of course, I can ask Copilot. It can go look up on the internet and find all the science fiction conventions coming up in the next 6 months. And while it does that, what I'm going to be doing here is that I'm going to call the list tool in Copilot. And I'm going to take the structured or the semi-structured data that Copilot found back from the internet, and I'm going to create a SharePoint list that helps me manage that process. So I can see right here, it sort of finds the dates and times. It's a lot of sort of stuff. And so I'm going to mention the SharePoint list tool right there. And I have a pre-coded, basically put, got to have my context right there. Put all these conferences in the SharePoint list. Add a column for where they're on the East Coast or West Coast, so it's going to have to look at exactly where the location is and make some determinate decisions. And add a column for the responsible team. Pretty simple here, right? Maybe I'll send some sort of team member to each particular conference. So I'll go ahead and do that. It's going to think for a while. It's going to make sure that it has a plan. It's going to validate that plan with me. And it's going to ask me where I want to be able to create this list. So you can sort of see, yes, it's chat, but right now the best thing to be able to answer that question is this little UI widget that allows me to select a particular list. I'm going to confirm, and it's going to go ahead and go and do that. And so you can see these new interaction patterns. So 80% of people preferred chat over traditional web UX. And maybe it'll take a while to get there, but you can start to see how the evolving patterns for creating content objects are going to happen. This is going to take just a little bit, and so what I'll put this one in the oven, and then we'll go to a different kitchen right now. Oh, that's actually way faster than I thought. Okay, we don't need to do that. I'll actually complete the scenario. I was going to go over and show you Page Agent and then come back here, but you can see it sort of created the list, and if I go through with it, you can see it successfully took all that data from the internet. It created some columns. Yeah, it's definitely worth some applause. how long that might have taken before. It might have taken a couple hours. You might have had to have some expertise in SharePoint, but now you can sort of see how these new objects can be created in a new interaction paradigm. And the really important thing, now if I go on my high horse for a second, is that this didn't create 10,000 lines of arbitrary JavaScript code like you do in some vibe coding tool. This created governed, recognizable objects that have permissions infrastructure, multiple years of history of building it out, but you're still able to use the new interaction pattern, UX model for creating it, but created these governed, recognizable objects that fit into your content management strategy. That was lists. We can do the same thing for pages. So here I am. I'm going to go say, now I'm actually in my Microsoft, so forget 𝗲𝗲 for a second. Where is it? Create a SharePoint page based about this Ignite presentation I just gave, and I'm going to give it literally the presentation that we've been doing, _final. It's going to go off and sort of take a look at that PowerPoint, take a look at, have knowledge of what a great SharePoint page looks like. And once again, new interaction patterns are coming out here. It could have just created the page, but it actually wanted to go back and forth with me a little bit and talk to me about the type of page it's created in the chat. What are going to be the top messages? Do I agree with that? Is there any particular thing I want to add? Of course, I could go back and forth. In the interest of time, I won't. And I'll just say, create the page now. It's once again going to ask me where would I like to be able to put this. So I spelled create wrong, but it doesn't matter. It knew. And so that was sort of an outline preview before. Now it's coming back and saying, hey, here's what the full page might look like. Does it still look good? Let me select the site. And if I go in here, same UX you saw before. I'm going to get a little site picker in just a second. And then there's one more interesting interaction pattern that I think we're really excited to explore when it comes to chat-based content creation. I'm going to create it in the ODSP team. And this is what we call side-by-side view. So of course, I could launch out into SharePoint and do some further editing. But what I really want to do is dynamically, sort of almost as a coding partner, see the SharePoint site or SharePoint page here be created in front of me and be able to interact and chat right alongside it. You've seen this interaction model and elsewhere. So you can see here's the page. It's added some stock imagery. It's really pulled the same stats that John was talking about, of course, because it's in the PowerPoint. Thank you. And of course, it's pretty good. If I had spent a little bit more time going back and forth with it, I probably could have even adjusted the length and depth to get exactly what I want, but not bad. And once it's created, I can continue to edit it. So one thing you all don't know is that there is someone named Rachel. She was instrumental in making this talk come alive. She was behind the scenes for John and I, helping get these demos ready. I want to really make sure she is thanked in this recap post. So I'm going to say, just a simple edit, I can do the page. Like, yes, you created a great page, but make sure to add this section that thanks Rachel. And if I were to go to do that, you can see as I type that, all of a sudden on the side-by-side view, it's going to tell me that it's drafting the canvas. Hopefully it won't take too long, and it'll add a little section at the bottom that thanks Rachel. So you can see just, what do we see here? We saw how we can start with a piece of world knowledge in Copilot and then sort of use that to go create a piece of SharePoint content. We saw this side-by-side view that is sort of really useful for these visual elements here. And that's sort of that first pillar of build and automate. Along with the Word, Excel, and PowerPoint agent for Office content, it can also create intranet and list-based content. But the second pillar that I want to show, let me go back to the right tab, is this new workflow entry in SharePoint document libraries. And so if I were to go to the new document UX, type workflow, you can see this is very different. People very familiar with SharePoint might have known before. Basically, we had one simple panel with a couple templates, and then we threw you over to Power Automate, hoping that you would be able to, as a power user. But this is designed for a different class of user. This is designed for anybody that works with documents to be able to create a Power Automate or a workflow that can manage a process within SharePoint. Under the hood, it is using Power Automate, but it has a new UX front end that is designed for the simplicity that you need within sort of the Office environment. And so, very simple example, I will go filter all my templates here to the one for SharePoint, notify a channel when a new file is added to SharePoint. So I'll go ahead and do that, and you can see it's already pre-selected. I'll sort of select a particular channel that I know exists. product LT reviews, and I'll save that. And just like that, I'm going to get a notification in the Teams channel every time an item is updated. If I need something more, of course, this is composable, and I can edit it in Power Automate. If I didn't quite get what I wanted, you saw there was a natural language text box where I can just type what I want, and it will actually be converted into one of these sort of rules or workflows here. And just to show you, if I go into Teams, and I go to Product LT Review Channel, and I click on Workflows, exactly the same UX. So a consistent, new, easy experience for creating workflows either on a channel or in a SharePoint document library. Yes, thank you. Including natural language creation as you need. So that, that's the two of the pillars. The third pillar is SharePoint Agents. In the interest of time, I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint and just talk about what's new with SharePoint Agents. I think we GA'd it back in January. It's a simple, easy way to be able to create a subject matter expert grounded on your content that you can name and prompt within seconds. And we really integrated it with the rest of the Microsoft 365 ecosystem in the past few months. And so first off, they're available in the Agent Store. They're also available in their most recently used parts of in the Copilot app. So if you use an agent, whether it's created in Copilot Studio or a SharePoint agent, it sort of appears in that MRU right there. You can add multiple agents to the same Teams channel right now. It is incredibly simple. You just copy the link to an agent, paste it into a Teams channel, and now you can, some of the rough edges of that have been smoothed out in terms of being able to add it to different types of chats and sort of multiple agents to the same channel. And then from a governance perspective, as of October, SharePoint agents have the same plain governance profile as any other type of agent in the system. They appear in the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. They get the same analytics. They get the same governance. They have the same ability to sort of block and turn off and manage the flow there. And so we're really excited about sort of that as sort of the third pillar. Of course, we don't have a lot of time to talk about it today, and there was a lot of other sessions, but SharePoint is an incredibly important knowledge source in both Azure Foundry and Copilot Studio, and that same sort of ask and find and Copilot and SharePoint Advantage applies to those types of agents just as much as it does to anything else we've talked about today. So I will pass it back to John to wrap it up.
Okay. Yeah, I know we just have a couple of minutes here. This is probably a good one to take the phone out and take a picture if you want. We're not going to cover everything, obviously, on this slide, but and we talked about some of it already, but a couple things to mention as well. The e-signature service in SharePoint and Microsoft 365 is now generally available. This allows you to create a signature request directly from Word and PDF documents stored in SharePoint. It even works natively with Adobe and DocuSign. If you haven't checked that out, it's definitely worth your time. You can also check out our SharePoint admin agent, just launched into public preview a couple of days ago. This helps you automate a lot of SAM tasks and common admin tasks in the SharePoint Admin Center. I'd also highly recommend everyone to subscribe to our monthly SharePoint Showcase blog. That's where we highlight community member solutions, best practices, functionality news, and a lot more. You can just search for that or find us on the Microsoft Tech community. And then I think we had one other thing, Adam, that we wanted to share here.
Yeah, you notice that we've listened to your feedback, and most of the roadmap was generally available, or you could try today if you're in Frontier or public preview. But you might be asking, so what's next after January? Do we have anything in for 2026? And for those that are in the audience or on the stream that have been involved in SharePoint for a while, you might be aware that SharePoint is one of the most resilient products in tech. It is having its 25th birthday on March 2nd, 2026. It shipped originally on 3/2/1, March 2nd, 2001. We plan on celebrating. We will have a virtual event to celebrate. We will share that off, of course, on the showcase, as well as sort of all of our social channels. We hope you join. It is a way and the place that we will both sort of celebrate the community that we built together, celebrate the success that folks have had with SharePoint over the years for both their organizations and their careers, and of course, talk about the future of SharePoint in an agentic future. So really excited about that. We have really a lot of news here. Yes, there'll be more coming from there. Everything we talked about today is sort of foundational and builds upon it. You shouldn't wait for this birthday before you start deploying the knowledge agent. It is great today. But we have some really exciting updates that we'll talk about on March 2nd to even move SharePoint more into the agentic future.
Okay, and just to wrap up, couple of things. We encourage you all to opt into the Knowledge Agent, learn more about Knowledge Agent, the preview with the QR code there. And we would like to really encourage everyone to go and experience that SharePoint plus Copilot advantage yourself, right? Replicate some of these scenarios we were just showing you today. Try it out in the context of your own documents, and test us head-to-head against the other AI solutions out there. We really welcome that. So overall, thank you all so much for joining us today to talk about SharePoint and how we're evolving with, of course, the help of all of you and our fantastic community into the knowledge platform for Copilot and agents. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at Microsoft Ignite's Silent Stages. Please leave your headset at your seat as you exit. Thank you for your cooperation.